got your handouts in front of you. I laminated one for you. Hopefully this will be useful for your farm. It's just easy to have everything like, what was that again? How do I make that? So this is a tool. It's nice. You can get it dirty. The little check boxes. Get yourself a little dry erase or something, and you can keep yourself from forgetting, did I add the FPJ or didn't I add the FPJ? Yeah. All right, so we'll go over those recipes all week. We're going to be doing stuff with that. But right now what I'd like you to do is flip to the basic solutions side and then pull out these two sheets. A couple of friends of mine took, you would not love it if I printed my note version of this. So a couple of friends of mine went through the work of putting it into a nice clear kind of PDF type version, and so that's easy to look at. But what we're going to talk about real quick is the nutrient cycle of natural farming. So the nutritive cycle theory. Let's see, where am I? The nutritive cycle theory has been around a very long time. We don't really know when people kind of started writing this down or calling it a core ag. It might have been forever. So this isn't created by Master Cho and Yo. I call him Master Cho, not like he's my master, but it's like a term for teacher, sensei in Japan. Yeah, so it's like a title, honorific. But nutritive cycle theory is kind of how we use all the solutions of natural farming on our farm, and it's very much about observation, so that you know when to use each thing on your farm. So your basic solutions are what we're going to talk about, and primarily right now what we're going to talk about is the stuff on the right side of your sheet there. Type 3, changeover, type 2. Okay? I probably should have put those type 2 on top, but oh well. So, generally speaking, we have each plant enters 3 stages. It enters a vegetative growth stage, or growth period. GP I'll put for growth period from now on. Changeover. Or XO. Or there's another way to write that. So, oh, yeah. I'll write that. And then reproductive. So if you look at the top of your sheet, you'll see on the one that Joe McGinn prepared, the principle of you and I are one. So this is one thing that's kind of nice is that you're not learning natural farming while it's being translated into 3 different languages with each sentence. So that is how I learned natural farming. Everything was very much through an Eastern mindset, and which is rad. I love it. And some of that I want to pass on, and some of it is difficult to understand and said in a different way actually becomes easier to access for our Western minds. So, not that everybody here has a Western mind, but so the principles of UNIR1 is the concept that plants are much like humans. We are quite similar in the stages of life. And so every time I was taught the nutritive cycle in Korea, I was taught it through the lens of a human growth cycle, human development. So we have, I'm not going to write all this on the board, but if you look at the one, man, I should have labeled these. That would have been a lot easier. The one with the shorter title. So one's made by Leslie, probably my best student to date. Sorry, Morgan. And the other's made by a peer, Joe McGinn. They did all the typing work. So the Joe McGinn's one. Joe McGinn's name's the bottom right corner. I guess they both the same. We'll just use Leslie's. Sorry. So baby, infant, child, boy, girl, teenager, young adult, full adult, early old age, middle age. You see that? That's all the life cycle of a human, right? And it's overlaid on the life cycle of a plant. See what I'm talking about? And so what we're doing is we're recognizing that plants are very much like humans in that they have, conception or that first germination. They have infancy, that baby, little, tiny first leaves. Not even the true leaves are developed yet. And they have childhood, which is like the first true leaves and really the beginning. And then growing to that kind of transplant phase, teenager, young person. The beginning of the ability for a human to reproduce. We'll frame it in the realm of a female human. The beginning of a female human to be able to reproduce is this concept of changeover. It's going from childhood to childbearing capability. A plant goes through that. A plant enters into that same thing. And just like when a human gets pregnant, there's this need for mineral or this concept of morning sickness. So does a plant. A plant goes through unique needs and changes in its development and how it eats and how it interacts. And same thing as full on or kind of the middle of childbearing progresses for a human. A plant in full production of a ear of corn or whatever it is producing flowers that's that series of reproductive growth we have here on the nutritive cycle sheet. And then there's again that cycle of seed production and dormancy and the end of the growth cycle of a plant or the beginning of the next growth cycle. So, all that to say, as I bounce back and forth between human and plant, just track with me. This is why they're overlaid on your sheets. They're overlaid in the communication of the idea. I didn't want to deprive you of the thought process of how this is taught and kind of how it came to be. So I'll teach it in that way as well. So right before you, both of these, I think, are the layouts for rice, which most of you probably don't grow. But it's kind of irrelevant that this is for rice. It's the concept that every plant goes through the same reproductive cycle, whether it's a tuber or a fruit tree. They all go through the beginning, the initial vegetative growth, the changeover from vegetative growth to production, and then the production phase, and then the end of production, right? Is everybody with me? Okay, cool. So, here, you see those three nutrients have some of the same language, right? Vegetative growth, changeover period, reproductive growth. All right, so in each if you look on the left of Leslie's here in the column, each phase needs that nutrient about 3 to 5 days before it reaches the stage in order for uptake to properly occur. Okay? So what you're doing, what the nutritive cycle is about knowing your plant's growth cycle and being able to feed it the right food at the right time in the right amount. We're not talking about preloading the soil with all the nutrients it'll need for life. The conventional practice for planting a tree is to put in the hole before you put the tree in all the nutrients it'll need for the first 2 years or something like that. And you just dump it all in, drop the tree in, and that tree is supposed to eat off that little bag of fertilizer at the bottom for the first couple years. You know, this is the concepts. And, you know, it's not stupid. It just doesn't work real well. It is reasonable that a plant needs so much food, but this is based on giving it that food in that time, and then you only need a tiny amount. So everything we're doing in natural farming, FPJs, OHN, BRV, is all about nutritive uptake through foliar feeding. So you can also do it through soil drench. That works too. But it's about having micronized nutrients that the plant can have right away. It's not something that's a slow release over a long period of time. It will persist in the soil if you nutrient drench, but it's about being able to feed your plant right now what it needs right now, because as an observant farmer, you're tending to its feed, right? I don't take my 3-month-old and cut up bite-sized pieces of steak and stick it in its mouth. My 3-month-old needs milk, right? When Judah comes to me and I'm like, I'm starving, I don't give him a tiny glass of milk and be like, here, that should serve you for the next 4 hours. We'd have a problem on our hands. So just like, and me, I sit down to the table and I don't have 3 bites of food, little things. My wife would know I'd get grumpy, maybe, or something like that, or I don't serve myself that and think that I can live for the week. Yeah, Kelly's got the harder job today. She's got the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old and the 5-year-old and the 7-year-old. So the right amount of food at the right time. So if I'm about to enter vegetative growth, what do you think 3 to 5 days before that I would start feeding? I'll do it in the same way that it's laid out so it's not confusing. What do you think I would start feeding my plant? What? Type 2. Okay, vegetative growth formula. What does vegetative growth have in it? So do you see how these are all set up? What's the base in all of them? Oh, yeah, it's the maintenance solution, seed treatment, right? So that's your basic. Just gonna take away one misconception in the natural farming community online. You never feed FPJ by itself. Ever in natural farming thought. There will never be a time that you dilute FPJ in water and spray it on your plants. It's too sweet. It's the wrong balance. You can get bugs that way. It's not something we do. So natural farming teachers that have learned, the whole theory process will not teach you to feed FPJ by itself ever. So if you're ever going to feed FPJ, you're always feeding it with OHN and with BRV. And if you didn't have OHN, then with BRV. All right. So what's changed in this? Now, the nutritive cycle theory, this gets complicated. There's a lot of detail to it. Today, this morning, I'm not going to go into all the details. If you look in your process here, you'll see 4, 3, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, all these back and forths. And we'll get into exactly what that is, but not extensively. What I want to give you, because I've taught this a bunch of times and recognize that if I go too completely into this, it ends up taking away confidence rather than giving. With the nutritive cycle nutrients, if you do it all wrong, your plants will get confused because of the highly available nature of these nutrients. Your plants will get confused, and you can actually lower production rather than increase production, because you'll be telling Judah to become a baby, or he's skinny to get fat, or fat to get skinny.
So you could use that to bring up the time of the flowering. Early in the time for really.
It's possible. It's possible. It's crop dependent.
Yeah.
Depends on your crop whether or not you can. But yes, you can kind of nudge your plant to do certain things with these nutrients. All right. So the basic concept here is there's the skinny plant, and there's the these aren't real plants. And the fat plant, okay? Now, if I have a plant and it's looking a little, and we'll go into the detail of this, how this works, and we'll play with it on the farm. But if I have a plant and it's looking a little skinny, it's looking a little hungry, that's when I give it type 2. I push it towards fattening up. Have you ever watched children? Who's watched children grow? Okay, so you ever see the little 2-year-old, they get pudgy, they're eating, get pudgy, and then all of a sudden, like in a month period of time, they get taller and they get skinny. You ever seen that? They go, pew! In kids, like a 10-year-old, they might get a little round, a little, and then all of a sudden, they turn 14 and they're like, skinny and tall, and then they turn, 25 and they start to, get stocky again, whatever. You see that change of a growth phase. They put on nutrients and then they use the nutrients. They put on nutrients and then they use the nutrients. This is the concept of skinny and fat. Okay, your plants do the same thing. They get into a stage where they're using them, they're growing, they're using them, and you want to feed them for that stage. So in vegetative growth, they're constantly using the nutrients and growing. They're doing their thing. So you want to feed them type 2. You're pushing them towards, you're helping them towards fat. Now when a plant's fat and it needs to do reproductive growth, you don't want it to be all in the plant. You want it to move into hardening off and making good structure and making good plants. Then you're going to give them type 3. You're going to help them move towards this. Okay, you kind of with me? All right, so So type 2 is what I give in the vegetative growth phase. I'm going to keep this simple, and we're just going to call that type 2 for the vegetative growth phase. I'm not saying simple because I think you guys are stupid. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying I want to communicate these ideas, and we all leave understanding them and with confidence to use them rather than confusion. And I've seen the other. All right, so now, when would I apply changeover? How soon before changeover begins? 3 to 5 days before. All right, so a little before changeover begins, I'm applying XO, or changeover. I didn't put XO on there. Is everybody okay with XO as an acronym? Can you guys track with me? Change over. All right. Now, a little before reproductive growth, what am I doing? What do I feed them? Type 3. All right. So, this isn't like weird, right? You already know, a lot of you that are farmers, you already know this stuff. Yes, in initial vegetative growth, it needs some food, it needs some nitrogen. In reproductive growth or in some of the fruit production, it will need some calcium to help balance its body. In the changeover, phosphorus is needed. It prevents that morning sickness thing that plants get kind of pulled down by as they get ready to make babies. So this is the basic concept. What we're doing is observing our plants. Now, when does changeover happen? So by the time flowering happens, changeover is probably about 2 weeks past. A plant begins to be productive in fruiting, depending on the crop, obviously, but significantly before it actually starts showing its fruit. So the key to knowing this line is knowing your plant and being observant. You know when the plant is getting ready, right then is when you want to feed it, right before it's getting ready. So ideally, you know your plant, and even before it shows signs that it's getting ready to change over, that's when, so to answer your question, you could, when you know it's about time, it could handle switching to fruit production, that's when you can hit it with changeover solution. And that phosphorus, as an added nutrient that easily uptaken, that micronized phosphorus will be readily available, and that'll help that plant not have the pull down of switching over. Does that make sense?
So you want to just identify before your plant starts to show any signs of flowering, just kind of from knowing and get it there.
Yep.
It's based on life cycle, right?
Based on life cycle.
Like life cycle.
Not every product, not every crop. You can. In your case, you can deprive, and you can do stuff with your plant to help it on its growth cycle with light, and that is one way to affect it. This is actually a additional way to affect. Yeah.
I mean, all plants have, depending if they're a short day plant or a long day plant, have, once the sun is in, it's got like a arugula will bolt if you plant it at the wrong time of the year. Because of its light cycle dependency.
Yeah. And Hawaii, we have about a 30-minute variation, and plants still do it. They know there's something else other than, because they're not actually getting more or less light by other than a few minutes. It's crop dependent. So depends what we're talking about. But like ginger. Ginger, you think in Hawaii you could farm ginger all year round. Ginger in Hawaii, you have to plant it in the spring and you have to harvest it in the fall. And the temperature variation is about 3 degrees, and the light change is about 30 minutes. And it knows, what changed, what's really different. Well, it just knows when spring is, and so there's probably an answer to that. What?
Could be moisture or like rainfall.
Where I live in Hawaii, it's 70 degrees all year round. We get a light shower in the morning, light shower in the evening, and that's about all the variation we get, about 30 minutes. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, can you keep a plant in the vegetative stage by giving it another round of type 2, or will it just keep going?
Not really. You can get it to keep going by giving it type 2, but it'll probably clunkily enter into reproductive growth, and it'll get a little sick or have that kind of pull down, have morning sickness, you know. So I made my wife take some type 3 during pregnancy. I think so. She didn't love it. She puts up with a lot of stuff, though. So, all right. So, any questions on this? Really, specifically, what's on the board? Pretty straight. Yeah.
If this is too complicated, feel free to push off later. But crops that kind of are in continuous production throughout.
Okay, I'll save that for later. It's a good question. Any questions really on specifically what's on the board? Yeah.
It's not specifically on what's on the board, it's on what varies from the board to our sheet. So it's basically.
Yeah, we'll wait on that for a second. All right, so we're all on, we got this. This is, all right. So this is the basic concept of the nutritive cycle, right? So we're observing our plant. All right, now I'm going to jump into the next bit. So say you're feeding your plant type 2. So do you see type 4 there? What do you think type 4 is based on where you find it? No, right there in the beginning. Look at that type 4. Seed treatment, exactly. Type 4 is seed soak or seed treatment or maintenance solution. Okay? So again, back to what does a baby need food-wise? Just a tiny bit, right? You're not feeding your baby steak. You're not feeding it crab. You're feeding it milk. And so seeds are the same. Your seedling, your seed really gets maintenance solution until it gets into childhood, which is kind of after the true leaves show. Okay? So after you have 2 true leaves, you can say you've shifted from infant to child. Does that make sense? All right, so type 4 is that minor mineral, because every seed has everything a baby plant needs for the first phase of its life. You know that? If you look at a seed, there's a little tiny spot on the seed that is actually the plant, and the rest is food. And it's all this food that it uses to get passed into that first true leaves. So you really don't need to feed a plant. A lot of people in conventional thought makes the mistake of thinking that a emerging seed needs a bunch of food for the beginning of its life, and that'll make it grow better. This is not natural farming thought. Natural farming thought is that the very beginning of a baby's life, it needs baby food. It needs very little, and mostly what it needs is the minor mineral found in FPJ, OHN, BRV, just this very, very limited light diet. And so we soak a seed, and then if you wanted to spray something on these new things, it would be a very light application of type 4 or seed treatment. Does that make sense? All right, so right there in the beginning, seed, we'll say type 4. Okay? And then, they put type 4 at the end, but we're not going to get into that right now. All right, so now I have a plant, and let's say that both of these plants are in vegetative growth stage. let's say I, as a studious farmer, have gone out to my vegetative growing crop, and I've noticed it's just like, it looks like it's just hanging out in front of the TV and eating ice cream. You know, it's kind of maybe lazily vegetative growth. It doesn't look like it's striving for the sun. What I have the power to do, or in Nutritive Cycle, what I need to do as a farmer is say, I think it needs a little type 3. I need to push it towards this direction. Okay, so I might have, I don't think that's in here. Yeah, so in your thing they call it hardy leaves, fleshly vegetative growth. So that's what you're trying to do by applying 3. So by applying 3, you're pushing towards hardy leaves, and by applying 2, you're pushing towards fleshly or fattening up. Does that make sense? So
pushing towards.
So type 2 goes towards this. I take the plant, this way. Okay? So by applying type 2, I'm taking the plant to being fat enough to produce everything it needs to produce, right? And by applying type 3, I'm taking a plant to, we'll make this guy taller and this guy shorter. Because if he stays at round, right, he's not going to get as tall or as maybe much structure developed. So this is to type 3, spray, to get it to go towards this direction. Okay, do you guys kind of understand that concept? What we're talking about here? If I see my plant kind of fattening and widening and maybe stalling, or maybe I just want to give it the right food at the right time, I can apply type 3 and I push it towards structural growth. Yeah?
Can you use that same process to affect, maybe you have a plant that genetically likes to be short and squat and you want it to stretch a little bit? Can you play with
Maybe. So think of the C, the calcium, as structural growth. Or if I'm building a house, it's my walls, you know. And so, yeah. So yeah, you're not necessarily going to change the genetic bent of a plant, but you can nudge your plant in proper directions. Yeah.
What if your seedling is just kind of struggling overall?
So a struggling seedling, that's a good question. This is that, because it's such a good question, I'm going to disrupt our journey in this. But here, if you had a struggling seedling and it hadn't really produced its true leaves yet, you could give it type 2. So you could, if need be, do here. But generally, you want to wait till the emerging of the true leaves to mess with that. But definitely don't preload your plant with a ton of nutrients in the beginning. If you guys are new to natural farming, if you haven't really been playing with this, maybe you just watched a couple of videos, this is going to seem slightly overwhelming, and I apologize for that. But throughout the week, this will make more sense, okay? So if this is like, what's he talking about? Why is he telling us this? Hold on. Just all you really need to stick with right now is this, what I did even before I put that on there. Just that you are feeding type 2, changeover, and type 3 in accordance with the plant's growth cycles, okay? All right, so the next, now what I'm going to do, let's say both these plants exist in the vegetative growth period. You have the observation power as a farmer to do type 2, and then maybe a week later it's looking a little too fleshly, a little too round. You bring in some type 3, and then, you know, a week later maybe you do type 2 right before, a week later you do changeover or something like that. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be spraying this every day. As a general rule, do not spray these solutions more than once a week. Okay?
That's don't spray number 2 more than once a week. You can do 3 at the same time, or don't spray anything more than once a week.
Don't spray anything more than once a week. You'll get your plants drunk.
And this is all foliar now, right?
This is all foliar. Yeah, so the idea in natural farming is that we have made our soil alive. Our soil's thriving with life. There's all kinds of nutrients there. We can put IMO 5 with some nitrogen into our soil. So our soil is going gangbusters with life and nutrient cycling. And this is just to give a pre-made meal to our plants at the right time, at the right amount. Okay? With me? Yeah.
Now you mentioned that a lot of the stuff being foliar, as far as how to apply this stuff. What about like some type of feed? Like
Soil drench?
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you're doing fertigation. So you can run this all through fertigation. We'll talk about dilution stuff and that later. But yeah, so ratios are all right on here. You can run that straight just like that through the fertigator. So I have a friend, I helped him create a process, actually a hemp project in Washington with some Indians, and they're doing they have a really cool liquid fertigation process, and they don't have to change anything. They can do this, it all works. They just add the right amounts ratio, and it does their whole tilt. What are those, the big boom ones that go out? Pivot, thank you. Tilt, pivot, whatever. So yeah, so what, but real quick, back to this, what I'm doing is I'm observing, and we'll go out and we'll practice. We'll look at plants and try and help you guys kind of identify this in a minute here. We're gonna end in a couple minutes. That same process of type 2 and type 3 can happen over in the reproductive growth period. Now, what if I want to give my plant something, but I don't really know where they are? So do you understand this, observing their plants? I know you don't like, what does the plant look like when it looks fat? What does it look like when it looks skinny? That'll take practice and observation. I'm not asking if you understand what your plant looks like when it's fat or skinny, but do you understand the basic kind of concept of what we're looking for? Are there any questions on that kind of observation of how's my plant doing? Which one should I feed it? Okay, cool. Say you don't know. I don't know where my plant is. I just wanted to give it a little touch of love. It needs a little touch of love. Maintenance solution. Okay, so that's that basic thing. Every single week of your plant's life, you can spray it with maintenance solution. Only once a week. And that will give it health. It'll help it with disease and bug resistance. It'll just tend to the life of your plant. Okay? And you won't mess with its cycle by giving it maintenance solution. That FPJ is a minor food. It's like giving it the best, like straight into its system compost. It's amazing. It's a plant food. But yeah, you can do that every week. Maintenance solution. Yeah.
So I'm only seeing the FPJ here so I guess my question is, does it matter what type of FPJ it is?
Yeah. So your question is, should it be baby fruit? What kind of FPJ should it be? Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Just because I noticed it didn't say FPJ, so I was wondering if I'm spraying.
Yeah. So another misnomer in the online natural farming community is FFJ is best when my plant's about to make flowers or my plant's about to fruit. That's not in natural farming theory. That has nothing to do with natural farming theory. That was just somebody's good idea. I can go down to my store, I can buy a bunch of papayas and bananas from my local grocery store, and that's what my plant needs because that's a fruit and my plant's producing fruit. It's not in natural farming theory. That's a misunderstanding that made its way to mainline thought in the online world, but isn't actually natural farming theory. I'll explain that more in a second.
What about using ripe fruit compared to unripe fruit?
Yeah, so FFJ, fermented fruit juice, is anything made with ripe fruit. We'll make some of that in class. You use 3 different types of fruit. They're all ripe, and you make FFJ. We're going to make some in class. I'll teach you all about it. FFJ in natural farming has extremely limited use. It's used in enhanced ripening. It's used in a few things. It's used in some animal husbandry stuff. It's used in some attractant for bugs. It is not used generally when feeding your plants. And I know that flies in the face of some online thought, but what if you're actually going to get better results if you use FPJ instead of what everybody's doing with their store-bought papayas and mangoes? So the idea that happened online is that, well, mangoes have a lot of nutrients in it, or papayas have a lot of nutrients, or I like the vitamin C, or I like the vitamin whatever. And so they're trying to get back into the NPK kind of theory through FFJs. And it's not the way with natural farming. I'm not going to teach you about that because it's not how it works. Check some of your thought about FFJ and FPJ based on the online information you got if you've been following everybody's recipes online, and say, okay, I'm going to learn here this week and see how Chris is teaching it. I'm just teaching you basic natural farming theory, and then see how that fits with the knowledge you got from some of those online forums of I got my papaya from the store and all that stuff, okay? Deal?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk more about it. I just don't want to get into that right now. What I wanted to do today, right now, is introduce you to the basics of the nutritive cycle, because this is a lot of the framework of some of the other things we're talking about, why we're making the FPJ, why we got the BRV, why we're making OHN. It's for this. So I'm going to erase and I'm going to put back on the board the 2 and the 3. And this is what I want you to leave with right now. If some of the other stuff you're like, I don't know, then start with this. This line being probably the most important. Okay? Learning to observe your plant and know when the pre-changeover is, not when it's begun to change over and starting those emerging buds. If it's starting to emerge a bud of a flower, then you've missed the changeover moment, the period. That was probably a week or 2 ago when your plant shifted from vegetative growth to, I'm going to start throwing flowers. Okay?